Manhattan was too loud on mornings like this. The usual chaos of the city, blaring horns, crowded sidewalks, the endless rush of people, grated on my nerves more than usual. But it wasn't the noise that bothered me. It was the silence that would follow. The trip back home wasn't one I wanted to make, but I didn't have a choice. Neither did Trevor. I threw my bag into the back of my SUV and slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool against my skin. The car was an indulgence, more than I needed, but I liked the comfort, especially for a long drive. 2 days, give or take. That's how long it would take us to get to Humboldt, Nebraska. I pulled up outside Trevor's building, tapping my fingers against the steering wheel as I waited. I hadn't seen him in months. We didn't hate each other. We'd just drifted apart after high school, both of us carving out our own lives in Manhattan. Me with my tech job, him with aerospace. 2 different worlds, 2 very different people. Trevor came out looking about as thrilled as I felt. He tossed his bag in the back and got into the passenger seat with barely a greeting. Typical Trevor, always quiet, always brooding. "You ready?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He shot me a sideways glance, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Do I have a choice?" I shrugged. "We owe it to Link." That shut him up for a minute, but it didn't take long before he was grumbling again. "I just don't see the point. We haven't talked to Link in years." "Doesn't matter, we're going." He sighed, leaning his head back against the seat. "He's dead, Dev. What's the point of dragging this out?" I kept my eyes on the road, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. "He didn't just die, Trevor. You know that." Trevor didn't respond, and the silence between us grew heavier. We both knew Link's death wasn't an accident, but neither of us wanted to be the first to say it. We crossed into New Jersey, the skyscrapers of Manhattan slowly disappearing behind us. The farther we drove, the more my mind drifted back to our small hometown. Humboldt wasn't anything like the city. It was quiet, too quiet, and full of memories I wasn't sure I wanted to confront. "You really think this is going to help?" Trevor finally asked, breaking the silence. "We'll see," I said, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. The truth was, I wasn't sure if this trip would help either of us. We weren't close anymore, and going back to Humboldt for Link's funeral wasn't going to magically fix that. But there was something bigger at play here, something that went beyond our petty differences. "We don't have to like each other," I said, my voice low. "But we both know this trip isn't about us." Trevor stared out the window, not responding. I didn't expect him to. All I knew was that we had to get back home, no matter how uncomfortable it made us. For everyone's sake, we could endure the next 2 days. By the time we hit northern Indiana, the sky had taken on that dreary Midwest shade of gray. We'd spent the night at a rundown motel, and now, back on the road, neither of us was in the mood for conversation. I kept the radio low, just enough to break the silence, but not loud enough to drown out my thoughts. The highway was straight, stretching out for miles in front of us. I glanced at Trevor, who had barely spoken since we started driving. He sat with his arms crossed, staring out the window as if the landscape could offer him an escape from the trip. "You gonna be like this the whole time?" I asked, trying to break the tension. He didn't even look at me. "Like what?" "Like you're being dragged to your own execution." Trevor exhaled sharply, finally turning his head toward me. "What do you want me to say, Dev? I didn't want to come. You practically guilt-tripped me into this." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, biting back a retort. He wasn't wrong. I had pushed him to come, but not just for Link's funeral. There was something more nagging at me, a truth we'd been avoiding for too long. "I get it," I said, keeping my voice level. "You think this is a waste of time. But Link didn't just die, Trevor. His body was..." I trailed off, the words stuck in my throat. I didn't want to say it, didn't want to put the image back in my head. The truth of what happened to Link was something neither of us had fully faced. Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I know." That was all he said, but it was enough. We both knew what he meant. The coroner's report had been vague, but the rumors that swirled around Humboldt were not. Link's death had been brutal, his body found mutilated on the side of the road. Traffic started to pick up as we neared the Illinois border. Rush hour, perfect timing. Cars slowed to a crawl, and I tapped my fingers impatiently on the wheel. Trevor's gaze stayed fixed on the passing signs, his silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Do you think anyone knows what really happened?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted an answer. Trevor's jaw clenched. "I don't know. Maybe." I wanted to push him, to force a real conversation about what we were walking into, but I held back. As the traffic inched forward, Trevor suddenly let out a frustrated sigh. "This is pointless." I glanced at him, confused. "What is?" "All of this," he said, motioning to the line of cars ahead. "Link's gone, Dev. We can't change that." I nodded slowly, but inside I knew it wasn't that simple. We weren't just going back for a funeral. We were going back to confront the truth. And whether we liked it or not, we were already too deep to turn around. The final stretch of the trip was always the hardest. An hour away from Humboldt, and everything around us had turned into flat fields and endless empty roads. I hadn't seen another car in over half an hour. Trevor was still in one of his silent moods, which suited me just fine. We pulled into a gas station, the kind that looked like it had been stuck in time since the 90s. The paint was peeling, the sign flickering, and a couple of pumps stood like relics. I parked next to one, and Trevor went inside while I filled the tank. A few minutes later, he returned with a couple of bottles of water and a blank expression. "The guy inside said there's a shortcut," he muttered, handing me a bottle. I raised an eyebrow. "A shortcut? Where?" "Some back road. He says it'll save us 10 or 15 minutes. I screwed the gas cap back on and leaned against the car, looking over at the building. Inside, I could see the old man behind the counter watching us through the dirty windows. "You believe him?" I asked, opening the bottle. Trevor scowled. "Hell no, but you know what that means." I nodded. Trevor groaned but got back into the car without another word. I took a deep breath, slid into the driver's seat, and pulled out of the gas station, heading down the narrow road the attendant had mentioned. The shortcut was anything but short. All these roads made a grid. No road was winding. But we knew that. "Great idea, Dev," Trevor muttered. "This isn't working." I was about to snap back when two sets of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. They had come from miles back very quickly and were riding close, way too close. I gripped the wheel, trying to stay calm, but the first truck didn't back off. Instead, it sped up, coming even closer. "What the hell?" Trevor's voice was tight, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. The first truck swerved suddenly, pulling up alongside us. I glanced over, and through the window, I could see a group of young men and women in the truck. They were shouting, but I couldn't make out the words. Then they swerved again, cutting us off and forcing me to slam on the brakes. "Shit!" Trevor yelled as our car skidded to a stop. One truck blocked the road ahead, and before we could react, another blocked us from behind. The doors opened, and the group spilled out, approaching us with slow, deliberate steps. We were trapped. A group of about 6, mostly guys, a couple of girls, moved toward us, their faces shadowed in the fading light. There was something off about them, something I couldn't quite place. Their eyes gleamed with a strange mix of excitement and malice. Trevor shifted beside me. "Stay in the car," I said quietly, but I wasn't sure if that was even an option anymore. The guy leading the group, a tall man with wild hair and a torn flannel shirt, came to my window and knocked. "Out! Now!" he barked. I exchanged a glance with Trevor, who was gripping his seat like it was a lifeline. We were outnumbered and far from help. I didn't want to escalate anything, so I unlocked the door and stepped out slowly, trying to keep calm. Trevor followed, his expression a mixture of anger and fear. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The tall guy grinned, showing yellow teeth. "Just a little company, boys. We don't get many visitors out here." The others closed in around us, and I could feel Trevor tense beside me. The leader gestured toward their truck. "Get in. We're taking a little detour." I opened my mouth to protest, but the look in his eyes told me that wasn't a smart idea. Reluctantly, I nodded, and they pushed us toward the back of their truck. We climbed in, and they shut the door behind us, the engine roaring to life as they sped off down a dirt road. The second vehicle followed with someone driving my car behind us all. The ride felt like it went on forever. The farther we went, the more isolated we became. We passed fields and dilapidated houses, the kind you'd see in an old horror movie, until finally, the truck came to a halt in front of what looked like an abandoned settlement. As soon as we stepped out, I saw people. Dozens of them, standing in the center of a large clearing. They watched us in eerie silence, their eyes reflecting the dim light from a few scattered lanterns. Their faces were gaunt, hollow, like they hadn't seen anything beyond these woods in years. "Welcome to the party," the tall guy said with a sneer, nudging us forward. We were surrounded, outnumbered. The crowd pressed closer, their expressions hungry and desperate. Then, a booming voice cut through the murmurs like a knife. "Back off." The crowd parted as a figure appeared from the shadows, John Carl Harvester. I hadn't seen him in years, but I'd recognize him anywhere. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that same intense look in his eyes. He stared us down for a long moment before something shifted in his gaze. His expression changed from fury to fear. "Leave them," he growled to the crowd. But the mob hesitated, and the tension was thick in the air. Without thinking, I reached into my jacket and pulled out the gun. I fired a shot into the air. "Look at us," I shouted. "You know us. We're not strangers." The crowd stilled, unsure, and for a brief moment I thought we might have a chance. The crowd froze as the echo of my gunshot faded into the night. I kept the gun raised, though my hand shook a little. Trevor stood beside me, his eyes locked on John Carl Harvester. There was no going back now. "Who killed Link?" Trevor's voice cut through the tense silence like a blade. The crowd shifted uneasily, but no one spoke. Some of them glanced at John Carl before quickly looking away, their guilt as clear as day. Trevor took a step forward, his voice rising with anger. "How long has this been going on? How many people have you murdered?" Still silence. I could see the weight of their guilt on their faces, but none of them dared to answer. It was obvious to me now that John Carl wasn't just complicit. He was the one responsible. His grip on the crowd was absolute. They feared him, and with good reason. Trevor's jaw clenched. "Answer me!" John Carl finally stepped forward, his eyes dark and dangerous. "This ain't your business," he growled. "Go home, city boys, before you end up like your friend." Trevor's hands balled into fists. "Like hell we will. Our families have worked with yours for generations, and now you're out here killing people? Turning into, what, a pack of animals?" He spat the words, his fury spilling over. The crowd murmured, but no one moved. They were trapped, just like us, bound by fear. I lowered my gun slightly, trying a different approach. "Haven't our family's farms provided enough work for you?" I asked, my voice calmer, though I felt anything but calm. "There's no need for this. We won't let you become a mob of cannibals." Then Trevor stepped forward. "If anyone wants to leave no questions asked, you have 5 minutes to get your things." A tense silence followed, but no one moved, until two did. A teenage boy and girl, who slipped away from the crowd, grabbed a couple of worn backpacks from a nearby shack, and returned quickly. They stood by our side, their faces pale but determined. John Carl sneered. "You think you can just walk away from this?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You think anyone will let you?" Without warning, he lunged at Trevor, a knife flashing in his hand. Everything happened in a blur. Trevor barely had time to react, but I didn't hesitate. My gun went off again, and John Carl stumbled back, clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. The crowd gasped but didn't move. They seemed frozen, as if they couldn't understand what had just happened. Trevor stepped forward, his voice steady now. "You've gone too far. This has to end. You're farmers, not killers. You all need help." John Carl crumpled to the ground, groaning in pain, and the crowd stared at him, unsure of what to do. For the first time, the power he held over them was broken. I lowered my gun, my heart pounding in my chest. I retrieved our keys from the girl who drove our truck back. With the two teenagers in the back seat, Trevor and I drove in silence, the weight of everything that had just happened pressing down on us like a heavy fog. The eerie quiet of the road matched the tension still crackling in the air. I couldn't get John Carl's face out of my mind, the fear, the anger, the madness. But it was over. At least for now. We pulled up to the nearest train station, a small, desolate building that looked like it hadn't seen much use in years. I parked the SUV and the two kids got out without saying a word. They looked back at us one last time, fear and uncertainty in their eyes. "Here," Trevor said, handing them a wad of hundreds. "Take this. Get as far away from here as you can." The girl nodded, her lips trembling as she muttered a quiet, "Thank you." They disappeared inside the station, and that was the last we saw them. I hoped they'd find some kind of life far from the horrors we'd just left behind. We drove to Link's house next, the old green place. His mother, Sally, answered the door, her face hollowed out by grief. She recognized us right away. "The man responsible for Link's death is gone," I said quietly, standing on her porch. She didn't say anything, just nodded, tears spilling silently down her cheeks as she closed the door behind her. She didn't thank us, but that's not something you thank someone for. Our final stop was the school track and field, a place where all of us kids hung out as there wasn't much else to do. All the memories of growing up together, the shared laughs, the fights, the friendship, had now taken on a darker edge. Link was gone, and so was any innocence we had left. "How did it get here?" Trevor said, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought life would be so different." "We do what we have to. That's mostly what life is," I replied. Trevor nodded, but I knew the weight of everything would linger with us both. On the drive out of town to the hotel we'd stay in before the funeral, Trevor started in on something petty, and I could feel the tension rising again, as if we were slipping back into our old dynamic. I slammed on the brakes, pulling off to the side of the road. "Get out," I ordered. Trevor blinked, confused, but complied. I followed, and before he could say another word, I kissed him, pulling him close. Then I bent him over the front end of the car by the wheel well and kicked his feet apart. I took him once before he spun me around in the same position, and had to outdo me with taking me twice. We stood there, our bodies pressed against the front of the SUV, all our anger and frustration pouring out in those desperate, breathless moments. After we collapsed into the car, exhausted, I handed Trevor the keys. "You drive. I'm done." Without missing a beat, he dramatically mocked my voice and repeated what I just said. "You drive, as if I have the energy to handle this ugly beast." I shook my head, but this time with a smile I didn't know he could create.